Welcome to our workshop on social studies. I'm Janice Price, and I'm one of Rainbow's team of consultants. I'm the eldest member of that team, both in age and time at Rainbow, which means I have the greatest historical perspective, of course. It should mean that I'm qualified to give you both an overview of history and social studies education and a means of sorting out the many curriculum products that fall into that category. Homeschoolers get history. The Miller family has been immersed the entire year in prairie life as their schoolwork is centered around the Little House books. The Beck family participates in Civil War reenactments, complete with zipperless costumes and tin plates. The Baird family looks forward every year to the Reformation Fair sponsored by their church. They sew period costumes and practice their jousting skills. The Montoya family participate in a homeschool cooperative that studies world history in 4-year rotations, incorporating lots of hands-on activities. One year they'll be learning Egyptian hieroglyphics, another the impact of the Black Plague, another the colonization of South America, and another the war on Britain. Homeschoolers get history, but social studies, well, maybe not so much. In the Rainbow Catalog, we have over 225 pages devoted to history and geography products, some 15,000 items. Did you know that there are less than 100 products that have social studies in the title? But you hear the phrase all the time, and you end up wondering just how it relates to history and geography. We're going to get into the specifics of each, but it's good to keep in mind that the two terms are used somewhat interchangeably by many people. Social studies is sort of a catch-all term. Another thing that's good to remember is that social studies tends to be used by the educational establishment. Homeschoolers tend to prefer history and geography. Let's take a look at why that is. The word history comes to us from the old French word histoire, or story, and from the Latin historia, which means narrative of past events. Webster's 1828 dictionary adds other elements to the definition. History is an account of facts, particularly of facts respecting nations or states, a narration of events in the order in which they happened, with their causes and effects. American history, or world history then, is the study of chronological records of the events of America or the world, with a focus on their cause and effects. Seems simple enough, doesn't it? On the other hand, defining social studies is no easy task. It's sort of like pinning Jell-O to the wall. For one thing, the term has been constantly in transition. In our day and age, every good school subject must have standards. And to develop standards, one must have a task force, or so I suppose. At any rate, the NCSS Task Force on Standards for Teaching and Learning Social Studies defines social studies as those which provide coordinated, systematic study, drawing upon such disciplines as anthropology, archaeology, economics, geography, history, law, philosophy, political science, psychology, religion, sociology, as well as appropriate content from the humanities, mathematics, and natural sciences. According to this task force, the primary purpose of social studies is to help young people develop the ability to make informed and reasoned decisions for the public good as citizens of a culturally diverse, democratic society in an interdependent world. Are you confused yet? That all sounds rather lofty, doesn't it? Contrary to its intent of pulling everything together, though, social studies curricula, at least in the elementary grades, tends to separate out these elements into topics that are then studied briefly in small chunks each year. This is reinforced by the actual standards that have been developed for the various grade levels. One middle school standards-based social studies approach devotes 36 pages to global studies, 34 pages to map skills, 26 pages to world geography, 39 pages to world history, 30 pages to U.S. history, 36 pages to U.S. government, and 38 pages to economics. Unfortunately, the results of this social studies approach are not very impressive. A 2008 study found that 25% of the 17-year-olds surveyed could not identify Adolf Hitler, and an amazing 10% thought he was a munitions manufacturer. This study also revealed that less than half of the high school seniors can place the Civil War in the correct half century. 1/3 did not know that the Bill of Rights guarantees the freedom of speech and of religion. And when asked when Columbus sailed for the New World, more than 26% of these 17-year-olds believed that Columbus sailed after 1750. Whatever happened to, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. History was once a core subject of study in every grade, beginning in elementary school. In Little Town on the Prairie, 15-year-old Laura Ingalls, along with a fellow student, Ida Wright, participated in a recitational review of the history of our country from its discovery to the present, which of course was the late 19th century. The book tells us that after briefly talking about America's discovery, Laura launched upon the great history of America. She told of the new vision of freedom and equality in the New World. She told of the old oppressions of Europe and of the war against tyranny and despotism, of the war for the independence of the 13 new states, and of how the Constitution was written and those 13 states united. Then, taking up a pointer, she pointed to the picture of George Washington. Laura and Ida completed the recitation by going president by president and giving a brief sketch of the significant contributions of each to the great American story. Education today, whether in the public schools or in homeschools, typically does not train for those types of recitations, but you have to admit it's impressive. Instead, over the past century, the teaching of chronological history, such as Laura received, has been steadily replaced by teaching social studies. The course Social Studies was first introduced in the early years of the 20th century, and in the beginning, history was recognized as its core. In the 1920s and 30s, though, educational theorists began to complain that teaching about heroes and history stories was nothing more than daydreaming, and they wanted schools to deal realistically with the problems of the neighborhood and the community. Fueled by the idea that academic subjects were only necessary for college-bound students, the goal of social studies became good citizenship with the view that historical studies did not contribute to social change and therefore had no value. History became preserved for the elite. By the end of the 20th century, many social studies professors showed open disdain for history, suggesting that the study of the past was a useless exercise that attracted antiquarians and hopeless conservatives. Sadly, in the late 1980s, a president of the National Council for Social Studies referred to history as pastology. Thankfully, there's been a shift in the past 15 years. A significant effort to revive the teaching of history in schools has blossomed, and it's showing up in curriculum. For instance, we've recently added a public school curriculum series, the AGS Social Studies, for middle school, which, although the series carries the title of Social Studies, it actually includes separate courses in world history and American history. That sounds like the way that Christian schools and publishers like Bob Jones and Abeka have been doing it for years. Social studies, then, for our purposes, is like a mosaic, a beautiful picture created by strategically placing small stones in exactly the right place to create a pattern. And an appropriate analogy, too, I might add, since mosaics are an example of historic art. So imagine a mosaic with dark colors representing history, fanning out from the center: world history, American history, state history, and personal history. Similar fans of another color represent physical and political geography, economics, and government. And we can begin to see the interrelationships. Then all around the edges are the disciplines that either impact history or help us to understand it. These are the elements that make up the rest of the story. We know them by their high school or college course titles: government, economics, anthropology, archaeology, law, philosophy, political science, psychology, and sociology. Does that list sound familiar? But it's easier to think of them as cultures, laws, religions, and lifestyles. Homeschoolers have a wonderful opportunity to throw out the piecemeal social studies approach that the schools are burdened with and study history as a cohesive whole. In other words, studying history in a way that includes geography, has lots of information about cultures and lifestyles and religions, as well as government laws and political boundaries. And it can be a rich study that draws upon biographies and autobiographies, atlases, maps, original source documents like diaries and journals, official documents like the Magna Carta or the Declaration of Independence, and historical fiction. History can be studied as that beautiful mosaic, where each stone or element has its own unique contribution to make to the beauty and message of the whole. History-based unit studies, or literature-based history studies, take it even further by exploring the interrelationship between history and geography with art, music, literature, and science. In other words, homeschoolers are able to step back and consider the mosaic as a whole, to see the patterns and interrelationships, rather than spending all their time focusing on the single pieces.